be hanging behind mirrors, behind crucifixes, behind pictures. This Sunday is a tradition for many people. Coming to Palm Sunday, listening to the gospel, receiving palms. But what does it mean? What do these mean? This Sunday means more than simply getting our palms, more than simply keeping a tradition. These palms that you hold in your hand and that you have placed throughout your house today are about preparing, getting ready the way. They are about preparing a path for Christ to come to us. The people of Jerusalem today prepared the way for Jesus to come into the city. They laid their cloaks on the road to welcome him. They cut palm branches from trees and laid it on the road to let him know, we want you here. We welcome you. Save us. Rescue us, which is what Hosanna means. Palms were used by the people as a symbol of welcoming and openness, of come and be with us. Palms are an invitation for Christ to come in. Now, welcoming Christ takes many different forms. To welcome a sister or a brother who is afraid, or hungry, or anxious, or looking for a home, is to welcome Christ. Welcoming the stranger, the different, the other, is what these palms mean. Because when we open our homes, we open our hearts and our minds and our country to the stranger, then we lay down palms before Christ. There was a story that I once heard about a family who, as they approached the border to another country, looked out into what seemed to be an endless desert. Ahead of them were miles and miles of open space, nothing but sand. And they knew as they stood there on the border that the space in the distance ahead of them would test their strength and would test their resolve. And what they were doing at that moment was breaking the law. But they were a family. And families will do whatever they need to do for their children, for a better life. Sometimes for life itself, because to stay where you are sometimes means that your child may die. And sometimes, tragically, they do die. We were reminded of that fact very clearly this week in Syria. The law that this family defied was the law of Herod. The family was Joseph and Mary and the Christ child. This story has been lived out over and over 2,000 years. I was speaking this week to the director of the Hispanic Brotherhood here in Rockville Center, and she was relating a story to me about a woman who had come to her for help. She had come into the United States without papers. She was here illegally. And when she was trying to figure out how she could help her come here legally, she explained what brought her to this country. Now, she was from the country of El Salvador. She had one son. Her husband had passed. And she was explaining to her that in that part of El Salvador where she lived, all of the towns were run by gangs. And what would happen is when a boy would turn 11 or 12 years old, the gangs would come for them. They would start recruiting them. And you basically had two choices. You could join the gang, which would mean you would end up in a life of drug use and crime and eventually an almost guaranteed death. If you said no to the gang, they simply killed you. Because no was not an option. And so the reason this woman came here in such haste and in such a rush was for no other reason than to save the life of her child. As Christians, we prepare to celebrate Easter. And we need to remember that the life that was ended on the cross began on the road. Began as a stranger. This Holy Week, we remember that Christ lived the first 3 years of his life as an immigrant, fleeing the land where he was born to escape death. Opening ourselves to those who have to struggle and humble themselves by putting out their hand to the things we take for granted, food and clothing and shelter, is placing palms before Christ. And it doesn't have to be the stranger, even those people who are nearest to us, who we see every day. The surly, unhappy, seemingly always miserable people, those that seem to have this chip on their shoulder, who seem hell-bent on spreading their misery to everyone around them. Openness to them, a word of kindness, an attempt to pray for them, is welcoming them. And in welcoming them, we welcome Christ. Theologian Frederick Buechner once wrote, "Compassion is the sometimes fatal capacity for feeling what it is like to live inside somebody else's skin. And once we have experienced empathy and compassion, there can never really be any peace and joy for me until there is peace and joy for you also." At the beginning of the liturgy today, we read the gospel account of Jesus coming into Jerusalem, being welcomed with palms and cloaks. Now, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, when Jesus enters into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, this is a rhetorical question, it's not a quiz. What is the first thing Jesus does after he comes into Jerusalem? He causes a riot. He cleans the temple out. He throws the tables over. He drives out those who are not supposed to be there, those who are defiling God's house. A strange thing to do after you have just been welcomed so graciously and so openly and so beautifully by the people of Jerusalem. You come in humble on a donkey, and then a few hours later, you're turning over tables, causing a riot, yelling and screaming, creating chaos. Today, if that had happened, Jesus would have been charged with disturbing the peace, destruction of property, and maybe even menacing. I presume that's correct. Those sound right, Ray? Those charges? You see, when we welcome the stranger, when we accept Christ into our life, when Jesus is welcomed into us, we are blessed. We are changed. We are transformed. We find new life. But sometimes when Jesus is welcomed in, sometimes when we invite Jesus into the temple of our life, Jesus needs to do a little house cleaning. You see, Jesus came to Jerusalem on his terms. Jesus comes to us on his terms. Jesus is not a polite house guest. So when you invite Jesus into the temple, Jesus will not stand there with his hands folded and his feet together, waiting for you to invite him to sit down. Jesus will come into your house. He will sit down. He will put his feet up on your coffee table. He will take the remote. He will switch the channel. He will rearrange the furniture the way he likes it. He'll go into your refrigerator, make a sandwich, and throw out all of your old stuff. When we lay down the palms and we invite Jesus into this temple, he will clean it out, because it usually needs to be cleaned out. But then what happens? When we feel that tug, when we feel that itch, that realization that we need to get rid of some stuff, when we realize that the Spirit is whispering in our ear that we need to clean house, what do? we show Jesus the door. Jesus, it's been so great seeing you. It's been such a long time. I've really enjoyed being here, but I got this thing that I've got to do at this place, and it's a thing I've been having to do for a long time, but it's been really great seeing you. Let's do this again. Oh. And we show him the door. Because we don't like people messing with our messes. In some ways, we're kind of like hoarders. We hold on to things. In our spiritual life, we hold on to these useless messes, these behaviors and attitudes and judgments and prejudices and biases, ways we see others, sometimes even how we see ourselves. Seeing ourselves as not measuring up, as failures, always somehow missing the boat, always somehow not quite getting that break we needed. But like the hoarder, we hold on to it. Even though at some level we know it's not good for us. We get attached to it. We get used to it. If you invite Christ in, if you lay those palm branches down and give that invitation, he will come. But he will say and do what needs to be said and done in your life. He will challenge your views of other people. He will push for you to give up the self-destructive behaviors, even call you out on the negative way that sometimes you see yourself, and show you the beauty that he sees. But here's the thing. He won't just call you out. He won't just challenge you. He will give you the strength that you need to make those changes. Because on our own, we can't. We get too attached. You want to be free. Pick up those palms. Lay them down. Lay them down as a welcome to Christ. Welcome Christ by welcoming the least. By welcoming the other, the darker, the foreigner, the hungry, unshowered, sometimes belligerent and offensive. Welcome them, and you welcome Christ. These palms are an invitation from you to him, welcoming him into the temple of your life. Prepare to be shaken up. Prepare to be tossed around, cleaned out,